Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's always nice to be able to come and speak to everybody when one gets the opportunity. It's very warm today, so if this jacket comes off in the middle of the sermon, you do understand. Today I want to look at, well, let's just tell you the title. Today's title is The Sovereignty of God, or God's Sovereignty. Okay? So, that's what we're talking about. So where do you begin when you start with a subject like that? Well, I'm going to give you a clue. We're going to be spending a lot of time in Genesis. And there's 50 chapters in Genesis. So this might stress out a little bit. It's 11:15 now. Let's see how we do. Okay? I want to begin with this concept of let's be honest about this. It's the sovereignty of God we're talking about. But God's sovereignty is always being challenged by the forces around. But they know they can't overcome him, so whatever he says will happen. So they understand that. So they look to trip up other things, namely us, because his sovereignty relates to us and his plan for us. And that's what we're looking at. So when God created, he made man and woman. We know this is important because the Bible tells us that it was man and woman that created the fall, or the problem of sovereignty. Eve didn't listen to her husband. Adam didn't listen to his God. The result, both of them no longer were considered righteous. That's a big difference. Because to be righteous is to be in harmony with God and obedient to his sovereignty over your life. So we need to begin to see this from the beginning. Why did Eve disobey her husband? Well, she was deceived. Somebody tricked her. We know who that was because they are identified as the serpent, the dragon, and Satan. We get this from all the way from Genesis over to Revelation. So there is no problem identifying who we're dealing with. This is Satan. Okay? So Satan is the architect of the fall of man. And he had a reason for that, but that's his position, so to speak. Now, why is this important? Because God's sovereignty had already laid out certain conditions. Through mankind, God was going to create righteousness, and that righteousness would inherit the kingdom, which would last for eternity, and all the servants of God, all the angels, would ultimately be subject to the children of God that were to come. This was the overall plan. The detail, the fine detail of this was not discussed with the servants. We know this because Jesus said, we don't tell servants anything, but you're my friends, so I can tell you everything. I can share this with you because you're my friends. And again, God speaking in the Old Testament said, should we not tell Abraham our plans? Should we not go and inform him what we intend to do? He's our friend. So we see that God's sovereignty relates to a difference between the servant and the inheritors, the friends. So in this case, we have Abraham. No, sorry, let's step back from Abraham a moment. We'll get to him. We'll get to him. We have Adam, we have Eve, and we're told that they have two sons. And when these two sons grow up to be young men, they make a decision to offer a sacrifice to God. One of the sons, Abel, makes a sacrifice of a lamb. It's acceptable to God. In fact, Abel is called in the New Testament righteous because in faith he stepped out and made a sacrifice to God appropriately. Cain, on the other hand, also made a sacrifice by cultivating the ground and taking of the fruit of the land and offering it to God. This was not acceptable to God. There's a reason why it was not acceptable to God, mostly because God had cursed the ground because of Adam's sin. Cain knew this, but he still offered what was considered cursed to God, which was not acceptable. But he was annoyed because he was quite proud of the fact that out of this cursed ground he had got such a good crop. He was very pleased, so to speak. And that's something to bear in mind. Pride of Cain caused him to make an error. He began to get jealous of his brother. Why? Because God had accepted Abel as righteous. So Abel is considered to be the righteous son of man. That's an important phrase to remember. The righteous son of man. That meant that from Satan's point of view, this could be the individual that God was going to work through, the chosen seed. So, Satan devised a plan, and it involved Cain killing Abel, which happened in the field. Do you remember? He hit him, and Cain died. Then he hit his body. And when God asked him where Abel was, Cain said he didn't know, he's not his brother's keeper. But God said, your brother's blood's already calling out for vengeance. And before we all get to that point where we begin to think, oh, so blood remains alive after it's dead and can still have a voice to call God. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, from God's perspective, this was a non-resolved crime, and justice still was outstanding, and as such, symbolically, the blood continues to call for justice. Why was it not resolved? The killer had been caught. He had been punished. He had been isolated, sent away from the rest of the family with his wife. He had to go away from the presence of God. All of these things all happened to Cain. And Cain was worried. If anybody found him, he'd kill him. God put a mark on Cain to protect him, so that wouldn't happen. So that he couldn't be killed or wouldn't be killed. So was justice not done? No. Because Cain was not the one responsible. He had fulfilled the act in the way that an axe or a club or a hammer would fulfill the act. But he wasn't the one wielding the act. And not truly in the sense. That was Satan. And he is not judged, has not been judged. And that's an important thing. He is guilty, he will be found guilty, and judgment will be passed, but it hasn't happened yet. How do we know this? Well, believe it or not, unclean spirits told us. What? Unclean spirits tell us? Of course they did, because they recorded in the scriptures. Jesus was casting out demons, or spirits, out of sick people. And every so often, they question him. Why have you come to torment us before the time, you Son of the living God? We know who you are. But did you get that? Why have you come to torment us before the time? Why is that so important? Well, you see, the time that they're relating to was the time set apart for their punishment. And it hadn't come yet. So as far as they were concerned, when they see Jesus standing there, remember, they're not looking at the physical body of Jesus. They're looking at who they know is really there. And they see him in his full splendor. And they're going, oh boy, why is he here? What have we done? What? We couldn't be at that time yet. So we understand there is a period of time set out. God's sovereignty won't change. But Satan thought he had beaten God's sovereignty. he had killed Cain. Or sorry, he had used Cain to kill Abel. So the righteous son was dead. Phew, that was close, wasn't it? Until we hit, of course, until we get back here, of course, and we find out that Adam knew his wife. This is Genesis 4. And she bore a son, and she named him Seth. Now, why is this son special? Well, you've got to understand, over a period of approximately 900 years, Adam and Eve had lots of children. Lots of children. And between the birth of Cain and Abel and the death of Abel, there would have been lots of children. Because they're estimating this at roughly 30 years. So there would have been children. So when Eve, who was a prophetess, you know why Eve was a prophetess? This is where everybody's hand should be going up. Because she spoke with God in the garden along with Adam. And if you speak directly with God, you're a prophet and a prophetess. Well, this prophetess speaks nice and simply, and she said, God has anointed another seed for me instead of Abel, who Cain killed. Now, why is that interesting? She didn't say it about any other, the rest of her children, but she said it about this one. And that's because Seth was going to become the ancestor of the righteous one who was to come. But this is all how we're beginning to get the picture of how God's sovereignty is already at place, and he's already began to reveal this is the line we're going to work with, the line of Seth. So he said, this is the righteous one that we're going to work with, this line. And so from here we begin to look, and we go straight to Noah, who was perfect in his generation. That didn't mean that his 3 sons, as their wives, or his wife, were perfect in their generation. It just meant that he was. Because, why? He believed God. He believed what God told him. And God said, I'm going to flood this earth. So I think you should build an ark. Here's how you go about it. And so he did. It took him 100 years, but he did it. He built an ark. And he got all the animals, and he set them as God had commanded them. And he put it in the ark along with everything that he would need for a duration of about 150 days. More, a little more. And all of that had to be arranged. That's a big undertaking. But because of that undertaking and his obedience, he's considered righteous. Simple as that. And we can forget about all those other children of Adam and Eve, because there's no descendants from them. They stopped at the flood. All their lines came to a halt at the flood. The line of Cain came to a halt at that flood. All of them, except Seth, because he is where Noah came out of. Now, interestingly, after the flood, we have lots of things that happened. But many generations later, while one of Noah's sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. That's so hard to get these names out sometimes, right? Shem was to be the one that we're following through with here, because he is the one who God is going to start working with. And while he was still alive, a son was born to one of his descendants, and that son was called Abram. And Abram, with his father and brother, moved from where they were to another country. And when they got there, one of the brothers died. And as a result of that, the father stopped moving. He wouldn't go any further. So after he died, God spoke to Abraham and said to him, take your nephew, your family, and all the rest, and go to where I'm sending you. Where I'm going? You don't need to worry about that. Just go. Now, this was a very interesting concept because Abraham was being tested on his obedience. And Abraham is only ever tested on his obedience. In other words, will he believe God? Will he do what God asks of him? And he does. Because as he gets to know God, he begins to realize God is very faithful, just, and right. So God follows through with this and begins to make him promises. Most of the promises are outside of Abraham's ability to fully comprehend. I mean, one of them is, I'm going to bless you with descendants. You're going to inherit the entire earth. Your descendants will be like the sands of the seashores and the stars in the heavens. And Abraham's thinking, I'm in my 80s, my wife's in her 70s. I mean, this is going to be tricky. So God pulls him to a side one time and he says to him, okay, let's have it. What's up? Well, you keep telling me that you're going to give me all these descendants, but I don't have any children. My inheritor is Eliezer from Damascus, who was born in my house. He's going to get everything. So is it him you're talking about? God said, no, the son's going to come from your loins. You're going to have a son. And God confirmed this. And Abraham said, okay, I'll accept that. Okay, fair enough. He went home and he told his wife. His wife, being a very sensible woman, said, well, I'm too old to give you a son, but I've got a wee handmaiden here, might help you. So she arranged a quick impromptu wedding. And guess what? Abraham had a son. And they called him Ishmael. However, God didn't speak to Abraham again for approximately 13 years. So he didn't realize there was a problem. Until one day God calls him up again, they have an hour wee chat, and he says, I am going to give you children. Yes, I know, I've got my son now. Oh no. The son's going to be born by Sarah. I'm 99. She's 10 years younger than me. She's well past childbearing age. And she was now at this time. So basically, he was finding it very difficult. But God said, no, I'm serious. You're going to have a son. He's going to be called Jacob. And he's going to be born this time next year to Sarah. And I'm changing her name from Sarai to Sarah. Because she's going to be a mother of nations, kings, of peoples. And everyone's going, wow. But what about Ishmael? Oh, I'll bless him too. But he's not the one this inherited promise has come to. And so God starts off with his sovereignty plan again. So Satan's going, what? He's changed the rules again. He can't do that. That woman's far too old. She can't possibly have a child. But you know, when Abraham goes back, he's not anxious to tell Sarah this because she might get a wee bit upset. Because she would love to have had children, but she was sterile, or what is it, barren, and as a result couldn't have children. And now she was well past the age of conception at 90 years old. So as far as she was concerned, that boat had well and truly left the dock. Except for one wee problem. Abraham mightn't have wanted to tell her, but God still wanted her to know. So he thought he'd tell her in person. Abraham's standing there in the heat of the day in the shade of his tent, looking out over the place. And all of a sudden, there before him are three men. Well, maybe not initially aware of who they are, but hospitality recommended. Come, sit down, let me prepare you a meal, make yourself comfortable, rest. So he does, but it doesn't take him too long to figure out that these are not just ordinary men. And they begin saying to him, you know that this time next year Sarah will have a child. Sarah's listening, and she can't help herself. Me. But that's a good one. And the stranger said, why is Sarah laughing? And so Abraham went and got Sarah. I never laughed. Oh, you laughed. You laughed and you laughed. Well, because you don't believe the word I'm telling you, but I'm telling you this straight. This time, next year, I will come by and you will have a child. And that child is Isaac. And Isaac was born that time next year. You see, God works his sovereign plan in ways that we don't anticipate or expect. We don't understand how it works. We don't see that the pattern that he is laying out is to show us the pattern of his Christ, of his truth. When Abel died, the righteous man died. Christ had to be crucified. He died. But when Seth was born, it was prophetic. His birth was not under the natural scheme. It was an additional birth, if you like, that God said, I am replacing this one, and through him, I am going to work with him. So Seth became a special child, pointed out to us for that reason, as one raised from the dead, as far as she was concerned. And this is all these things point out. Again, we have the two brothers, Cain and Abel. Cain represents the first Adam. Abel represents the last Adam. This system will continue because God keeps this theme throughout the book. Sarah died. And Abraham recognized it was time to get Isaac a wife. Now, the problem is, Abraham also knew that God did not approve of Isaac marrying any of the local ladies in the area. So the only thing you could do is send somebody home and get a wife there for him. Problem was, these things meant to be arranged in a particular fashion. And they weren't in a position to do that. So Abraham calls his most trusted servant, pulls him up and says to him, okay, I'm going to task you with an oath. I want you to do something for me. You are to swear that you will do it. They used the most sacred oath that they could do at that time, which was under the thigh. And basically it was unbreakable in their time. That was what it was considered. And he said, here's what the oath is. You will go back to where I come from. You will find a wife for my son, and you will bring her here. And the servant kind of pointed out one or two little things. A, how? B, what if? And C, what do I do then? The A was, how will I manage to find you a wife in your own people when nobody knows that you're even alive anymore? They don't know you anymore. A massive amount of time has passed. 60, 70 years. Second, what if her family don't release her? What if they won't allow me to take a young woman away from her home, from her family, from her people, out into the wilderness for what they don't know what's going on? And finally, what if she doesn't come? Because if she is objecting, I'm not to take her. So the situation was very difficult. But Abraham said, look, if she doesn't come, not your problem. If they don't let her come, not your problem. If you can't find her, not your problem. Your problem, go look. I'm leaving this with you and my God. Away you go. So under that condition, servant headed off, loaded the camels, got treasures of all shapes and sizes, and to go walk into the wilderness for all intent and purpose. A massive, massive journey. He arrives at the outskirts of a town in that land, and he decides, I better start asking for help here. So he prays to God. God of my master Abraham, you know what I've been sent to do. There's no way I can do this, but you know already what's happening, so here's my question. With your permission, let the lady who you choose to be the wife of my master's son come out here to the wells and offer to give me a drink of water and to give water to all the camels. Whoever she is, I don't mind. I will accept her as the one you've chosen. And then he started unpacking. In the distance was a young woman walking towards him named Rebecca. And guess what? She saw them all tired and said, let me get you some drink. Here, I'll get water and pour for your camels too. And he's absolutely gobsmacked. Not only had God answered him, but he had already sent the girl on her way before he made the prayer. I mean, he had everything sorted. So he gives her a ring in her ear, and he does a nose ring for her and all the rest, and he tells her who he is and the reason he's come, and she rushes back to her home and tells them, and they come and welcome him into the house, and he tells them the story, who it is, and they're agreeable. And then he says, well, look, if you're agreeable and the girl's agreeable, I want to leave immediately. I don't want to delay, because my master's old. And they're a bit reluctant. They say, hang on, customs, you know. There should be a few months here where she has time to say goodbye and, you know, make sure she's really content about this. But he says, look, I don't have that sort of time. And so they said, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll ask her. And so they ask her. So the then see part of his question to Abraham. The girl has to agree. So we'll ask her. And she does. Yes, I agree. So they send her a handmaid, and they send her off the next day. They bless her with all the blessings they can give her, and they keep all the treasure for themselves. As you do. So as far as anyone else was concerned, she had been sold. But she went willingly. And she was away to family to be married. Now we know the story. But now God's going back to his wee pattern of twos. Because first of all, the first problem that they have as a married couple is that she can't get pregnant. She's barren. Her aunt was barren. She's barren. This is things that you have to understand. This is running down this family line. There is barrenness in the women. And it's a very difficult problem to get round in the natural. So, she complains to her husband about it after a good number of years. Now, she didn't go to Abraham and ask him to intercede on her behalf. She went to Isaac. And Isaac interceded on her behalf. And he prays to God for her. And because he prays to God for her, she conceives twins. And as far as we know, these are the only children she ever has. There's no record on the Bible of her having more. Now, of these two twins, she has a very, very disturbed pregnancy. What we would call a bad pregnancy. Yes? But here's the problem. She's having nightmares. And in her nightmares, she sees these two fighting each other, constantly struggling with each other, and really having a very disturbing time. And she knows that the younger is going to be more important than the elder, and that the elder will serve the younger, because God's already told her these things. Because guess what she is? She's a prophetess. God has started speaking to her too. And he started talking to her. And so here we have God's intervention directly into the family line. He has healed her of being barren. And now she has two sons who are spiritually at enmity against each other. And before they're born, God has already declared that he hates one of them and will reject that one. That's a terrible thing to be faced with when you're a mother, isn't it? One of your sons that you're going to have, God is going to reject. He's going to say, no, I'm not having him. His prodigy will not continue forever, but his will. I'm blessing him. And that's a very wide problem to consider. But this is exactly what happens. God's sovereignty is such that he is able to make all these things take place exactly as he wants. And as we know, the two boys don't really see eye to eye. They're as different as chalk and cheese. And while Isaac loves Esau, Rebekah loves Jacob. And that is where we run into a little problem, because she sees things different for him. And because she's a prophetess and knows the will of God in these matters, she sees an opportunity as her husband goes blind and old for him to get the birthright to the right son, so to speak, by deception. But that's only going to lead to more bother, as we know. But again, all part of God's plan. Now, here's my problem. I told you that we were going through the book of Genesis, yes? There are 50 chapters in the book of Genesis. Do you know where we got to? We got to about 20. Hold on, I'll get it. 24. That's when the thing. So that's it, 24. Ready to go on to 25. But we're already past our time, so I'm going to close there, and we will continue this at another session later, because we still have to get on to the star of our show, Joseph.